Quite a few years ago, I had a training program where 40 of us went for some fairly sophisticated education about the operations of larger corporations. And at one point, they divided the 40 of us into 10 teams of 4. And the idea was to run a computer simulation of managing a large corporation. And the simulation was fairly complicated. I mean, it had, sales and marketing and personnel and debt service and loans and stockholders and suppliers and customers. I mean, it was a very complicated setup in trying to teach us some of the issues that senior managers in large corporations had to deal with. And none of us had ever done that. So, it was intended and probably was going to be a very valuable exercise. Unfortunately for the teachers, there were some pretty smart people on my team of 4. And when we went back to the dorm that night and were sitting around talking about it over dinner, we realized that we were not in any way going to run a corporation. We were going to be dealing with a computer simulation, which basically is a computer game that's been set up by people with various considerations and parameters. And one of our 4 was an IT guy. And so we went back with him to the classroom and started running simulations of this, what was essentially this computer model. And after doing that for half an hour or so, we figured out that whoever had the most cash, if you could get the most cash on hand, big surprise, you could drive the game so that you couldn't lose. And you could win absolutely guaranteed. So the next day, this was a multi-day lesson. The next day, we started playing the game, and all we did was accumulate cash. We didn't care about anything. We weren't running the company. We weren't doing anything that a manager would do. We just tried to pile up cash. And at the end of the first day, we had way more cash than anybody else. And so we knew now we couldn't lose. And on the second day, we ran the simulation again, and now, because we had all the cash, we implemented our strategy, and we started to drive the game in our direction. And we got way ahead. And on the third day, early in the morning, we bankrupted everybody. We had like $6 trillion. Everybody else was out of business. They were completely, totally broke. And nobody could figure out what happened except sort of the teachers knew and were not very happy. And so, we won the game, but we destroyed the exercise. Why do I tell you a story about us being sort of despicable cheaters, which I think is kind of what we were? Well, the reason is that's what's been done to the American economy and also to American politics. Really smart people are figuring out how to use these systems for their own ends. Things that used to be capital markets are now being driven by people who are not really providing capital for corporate enterprise and productivity and growth, but are using it in ways to maximize their own incomes and maximize their own profits. The political system, we used to have elections. I mean, really, significant elections where we talked about policy. Now, there are 5 or 6 states in play. 40 plus states, it doesn't matter. You could run a ham sandwich for either party, and for 40 states which way they're going to go. There are only a half a dozen that are really in play. And years ago, after one presidential election, I attended a post-mortem where a very sophisticated consultant was analyzing the results of the election. And I couldn't believe that I was listening to him talk about how Ohio was decided by a very narrow campaign around the north side of Cincinnati, where the pundits and analysts had figured out that if they could get enough votes on the north side of Cincinnati, they could carry Ohio, which meant they could probably win the election. And that's what our elections have come down to, rather than a discussion of national policy and direction and all the things that we should be discussing and used to discuss when we had presidential campaigns. This is, it's obviously troubling, but it's something people haven't really recognized. And what it says is that the systems that were originally designed for democracy and elections are really not able to withstand the kind of analysis and I guess I'd call it abuse that they've been subject to by people who don't really have the bigger picture but are really operating from a base of self-interest. The question is, what do we do about it?